Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
At the beginning of each year, speaking of wine and spirits polls what it considers the best restaurants all over the United States to get a better understanding of where the wine industry is and where it is going. Things like the most popular wines at that given time and more.
Well, the results from the poll, they're not out yet,
Nope.
but we're getting a sneak peek at some of the results from Josh Greene, the editor-in-chief of Wine and Spirits magazine. He's here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. He did bring some wine for us to drink. We're not going to pop the cork
It's not why
until
we're so excited.
a
Maybe
little bit later. But Josh, we're going to get to the poll in just a few minutes. Welcome, by the way. How are you?
Thank you.
Good to see you,
Tim.
again.
Good to see you, Carol. Yeah.
I want to start big picture here because 4 years ago, it's great. We're in March, and every March I think of the pandemic now because 4 years ago we were at
remarkable,
this
right?
point where things were about to shut down. When they did shut down, it turned out a lot of us started drinking a lot of wine. And I'm wondering, post-pandemic, where things are in the wine industry.
Things are a bit of a struggle in the wine industry right now. In fact, I think that the supply issues never really balanced out. And that, in addition to a lot of changing demographic trends, have really hit the industry pretty hard this past year. We saw it in our poll, and we also saw it in some data that was just released by SipSource, which is part of WSWA, the Wine and Spirits Wholesaler Association, where they look at depletions, wholesaler depletions. And in year over year, 22 to 23, volume was down by 8.1%, which is significant. And Nielsen I
The
think
inventory was taken down because of a lot of. Help me understand.
it's really, people don't really know exactly. I don't think people know exactly what's going on. I think that people say that young people are drinking less. Whether young people want to be drinking less or just simply can't afford to be drinking at the prices that wine costs now is another question.
I found
And that's
a lot of
something
good
that
$20 bottle of wine.
they're great $20 bottles of wine.
Right?
They're great $12 bottles of wine.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's no,
Interesting.
we've talked about this a lot, but
But,
there's
yeah.
no question that the younger demographic is not drinking at the same rate that previous demographics were. Athletic Brewing, you know, the non-alcoholic
You
beer,
love,
which
big
I love.
fan.
They are the top-selling beer at Whole Foods right now, including all the alcohol-inclusive beers too. So I think that speaks to sort of a changing shift in how consumers are thinking about it. But it's interesting to hear that about wine too.
Well, and in our poll, what we did this year was quite different from how we've done it in the past, because I think polling has really radically changed across the board. I mean, I just heard something on the news this morning about how respondents used to be like 70% of polls, and now it's 1% if you're lucky. So
you think there might be some issues with the data?
No, what I'm saying is that we did it completely differently this year. So what we did was we literally called and interviewed 100 people, and we selected who we were going to call, and we had 12 people on the team doing it, and we asked them all the same questions, right down the line. And so we gathered the information differently than we have in the past, which was having people fill out a form in the past. And so it's less data than we've had in the past, but it's we're asking very different questions.
Is it more nuanced or more, do you feel like more specific in terms of the way you guys did it?
It's more nuanced.
Yeah.
And it's also that we were able to do a lot of follow-up questions with people on the spot. You know, when people would tell us that they were moving in this direction or that direction, that we could really then pin them down to why and what that was about. And it really, what was fascinating to us is that it mirrored exactly what you're talking about, Tim, we heard so much about non-alcoholic wine and non-alcoholic cocktails, which we've never heard about before in our polls, ever.
Kind of wild, right?
Yeah. And
We've had, I'm trying to think, forgive me, I can't remember if it was...
Reserve Bar?
No, I can't remember what the company was. Big alcohol company, but they talk a lot about, I think, some of the non-alcoholic, worlds that they are getting into because of the demand that are there by the younger generation.
There's a big demand for it, and a lot of people who are doing tasting menus with pairings would traditionally do, like they've now turned to doing a tasting menu and a vegan tasting menu, or vegetarian tasting menu. Plus, they've turned to doing alcoholic pairings and non-alcoholic pairings. And I'm just trying to find I think it was Stephen Schaefer at Mago in Oakland. He said that they sold the same number of non-alcoholic pairings as alcoholic pairings. For them.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
so
wild.
surprising. That was a quick shift.
Completely. Yeah.
So what does it mean for the wine industry?
It means there's going to be a lot of soul searching, and there's going to be a lot of change. And to me, what's interesting about the results of the poll this year is that we spoke with the really creative leaders of, the people who are trying to find ways to connect with their guests about what they want to be drinking. And so we heard a lot about what these creative wine directors are doing to deal with this trend, of people drinking less. And the volume is down. I haven't seen numbers about the value. So the industry may not be hurt as badly on value as on volume.
Meaning raising prices in order to compensate for lost volume?
Meaning that the wines that are selling, not necessarily raising prices, but the wines that are selling are at a higher price point than, there was a lot of wine being sold in this market at, there was $2 Chuck.
Right.
Never,
ever.
Now people are looking at $12 wine rather than $2 Chuck.
But it's funny. My husband, who loves
now there's Josh wine.
There you go.
But my husband, who loves wine, I think would much rather have a bottle of really expensive or nice, really nice bottle of wine, maybe less frequently, versus maybe not as expensive and maybe not as good. I hate to do price and quality, because I do think you can find some great inexpensive wines, but you know what I'm saying? Like, make it an experience and be something. I don't know.
I think there's a lot. I think people find a lot of value in that experience, and I think that the industry is moving in that direction to provide experiences.
Yeah,
a lot
experiential.
A lot of younger people appreciate buying into an experience rather than just buying alcohol. So a lot of what's going on in the transitions in the industry are developing these kind of experiences for people.
I want to get back to our guest at this hour. It's been quite a week already. We're not quite done, and grateful to have Josh Greene with us, editor-in-chief of Wine and Spirits magazine, here in our Bloomberg, here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. And Josh, we want to talk a little bit more about kind of some of the trends that you're seeing. As we do this, we are going to have Stephen Schmitz is here with us, who came along with you, and he's going to open up a bottle of wine for us so that we can sample a little bit. I think the first wine is a white wine.
A white wine from the Azores, yep.
From the Azores. Okay.
Nice pronunciation.
How do you say it so that we all know?
Well, in the United States we say Azores.
Okay.
But in Portugal they would say Azores.
Okay. Are you having some trouble over there? Steve's got it. All right. Steven got the pop.
That was not trouble. He knows how to do it.
Is that one of the trends that we're seeing in terms of wines that people are either asking for or restaurants are playing with? What do you see?
So the main trend that we saw in the poll was that a lot of the leaders in the wine director industry, the sommelier industry, they are looking for alternatives to the big name wines and the high priced wines, and they're looking for legitimate alternatives to them, because these are a lot of the restaurants we poll are very high level restaurants with they're not inexpensive. But one of the things we asked was, what new category or region did you add this year that got the most traction on your list? And the more people, so 13 out of 100 people said Portugal. That was the most of any region that people responded to.
Why is that?
Well, many people said that it's because people are traveling there. And
Everybody's going to Portugal. My parents are
about
going to Portugal in a few weeks. Everybody's going to Portugal.
So it used to be that people would go to Tuscany, come back and want to drink Chianti.
Yeah.
And now people are going to Portugal and coming back and wanting to drink Portuguese wine. And so this is a Portuguese wine that we brought, and this is like,
tell us about this.
This is killer wine.
Smells really.
So
I'm not a huge
we actually
white
brought
wine, but
two
it
wines
smells.
from our top 100 event that we just did 2 weeks ago.
Awesome.
Na zdrowie, as we say. I'm a Slovak.
So this is from the Azores, and it's from Arinto de Azores, which is a white grape, and the vines are more than 100 years old.
That's nice.
So it is very concentrated.
Yeah.
It's also in a place that's very windy, so that deepens the concentration of the wine even more, because the wind is drying out the grapes a bit.
Yeah.
And it also has a lot of salinity, because you get all of the ocean spraying salt into the land there. Yeah. So
it's really good.
It's lovely.
I really like it.
I love this wine. I'm completely.
And I'm not a huge fan of white wines. Mm-hmm. This is lovely. Lovely.
What's the varietal of this wine?
So the varietal is Orinto, but
Okay.
it's Orinto of the Azores.
Okay.
So there's Orinto on the mainland in Portugal, different grape.
Very far away, geographically.
Yeah.
I mean, 1,000 miles.
Yeah, but culturally not so far away.
Mm-hmm.
And there are big communities of people from the Azores here in the States.
Right.
So this would be obviously much
like it a
crisper
lot.
and finer if it's colder, but we like to show the wines at sort of cool room temperature so you can actually really taste them. And I think the length on this wine is extraordinary.
Are we also then seeing, I'm assuming as people are traveling and bringing, what they find overseas or in Portugal, that restaurants are responding in terms of expanding what's on the wine list a little bit in terms of the offerings?
So what was fascinating to me...
Stephen, you can go ahead, and I know he's got another, we're going to move from white to red in a moment, so Stephen's going to open up
Are you
another
done with your
bottle.
white?
No.
Okay.
We've polled
can
these
juggle.
restaurants for 35 years.
Yeah.
We've never heard a peep about Portugal. Not like barely a mention in any description of wines that they were selling. And this year, Haksu Kim at Persay was talking about it.
Interesting.
Aldo Sam at Le Bernardin was talking about it. Across the country, people were talking about it.
Yeah.
It was really surprising.
That's recognition. I mean, these
Yeah.
are, you're talking about your top restaurants.
Well, Aldo was saying that he has a wine called Koch from a producer called Newport in the Douro. And there's a wine that is made in a similar style to a white Burgundy, but it's obviously very different grapes and it's a very different climate. But it gives you the same, it sort of scratches the same itch as a white Burgundy would. And he poured it for a couple collectors who'd come in that don't know about Portugal wine at all. They loved it. They wanted to buy a case of it when they left.
Yeah.
They were completely enthralled with it.
Carol just poured the red.
The red.
Yes.
I just poured the red. We're going to pass it around. In terms of pricing, I mean, like I said to you, I have expanded my mind a bunch over the last few years. And
But not all the way to $2 Chuck.
No, not to $2 Chuck. But in terms of talking to folks like you and others and really kind of learning in that, I like to try things. And it's amazing the amount of variety that you can get in terms of the cost of wines. And just because it's less expensive doesn't mean it's a bad wine.
No, these two wines are not less expensive because
Okay.
they are from they are two of the best wines we tasted last year.
Don't spill, in other words, kids.
Yeah. So they do make a less expensive wine from Orinto and also from Verdejo. That's beautiful as well, but it's not as concentrated and rich, and it's lighter and fresher.
Right.
But it's from much younger vines, not 100-year-old
And
vines.
that's the real difference usually, typically, or what?
What you get with an older vine, I mean, it's interesting. And I brought the magazine with me for you guys to look at after. And I have an article in here about old vines in Austria. Mm-hmm. And I talked a lot with people over there about
very
what
nice.
they're getting from old vine fruit that's different from younger vine fruit.
Yeah.
And how they're sustaining their old vines to do that. And you get the concentration that you wouldn't otherwise get. You get a different maturation process from during the growing season.
Right.
So what Kathy Corison, we're drinking Kathy Corison's Cabernet now. What she's done
lovely.
is she's sustained very old vines in Napa Valley. She has probably the oldest Cabernet vines in one block in Napa Valley, 72, I think they were planted. And this wine is not from that. This is from her own other grapes and from some purchased grapes, but all in that same area.
Price point on this one?
I don't want to know.
Yeah, it's I shouldn't guess, but I should have written down the prices on both these wines, but they're both. I think that I'm pretty sure that the Orinto de Azores is over $100 because it's such a rare wine. This wine, I think this wine is probably in the $80 to $100 range.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tastes like it.
It's not cheap.
We didn't get time for this, and I think we've touched on this in the past here, but I love the idea of the age of vines, preserving them, the sustainability, because that's become such a big part of the industry. So because we didn't get to really move all the way into that, you're just going to have to come back soon.
Absolutely, yeah.
But thank you so much. Final thoughts, five seconds here?
5 seconds. I think that the industry, you'll see if you go out to restaurants, you'll see a lot more new stuff from Portugal, from Spain, from Central Europe, from Chile and Argentina. You'll see a lot of new alternative wines.
Josh Greene, thank you so much.